March 1971. A small piano bar in North Beach, San Francisco. 73-year-old Eleanor Hayes sat at an out-of-tune upright piano, playing My Way for a handful of tourists who weren't really listening. Her arthritic fingers stumbled over keys she'd once played flawlessly in Carnegie Hall 40 years earlier. Then the door opened. A man in a fedora walked in alone. And what happened in the next 18 minutes was captured on a bartender's camera and became the most watched moment in piano bar history. This is that story. The Milano bar wasn't much. 12 tables, a bar that seated 8, and a piano that hadn't been tuned since 1965. It sat on a side street in North Beach. The kind of place tourists stumbled into by accident and locals avoided. But it had a piano, and on Tuesday nights they let Eleanor Hayes play. Eleanor had been a concert pianist once. Juilliard trained. She'd toured Europe in the 1930s, played with orchestras, had her name in programs alongside the greats. But that was before her husband died in the war. Before her hands started shaking. Before arthritis turned her fingers into something that barely worked. By 1971, she was 73 years old, living in a studio apartment above a laundromat, and playing piano 3 nights a week for tips that barely covered her groceries. The owner, Mr. Cardoza, let her play because his wife had known Eleanor in the old days and felt sorry for her. This particular Tuesday night, March 16th, there were maybe 8 people in the bar. 4 tourists from Ohio, 2 businessmen nursing scotch, a young couple on a date. Eleanor sat at the piano, her gnarled fingers finding the keys, playing My Way. She'd played it 100 times. It was Sinatra's song, the one everyone knew, the one tourists sometimes requested. But Eleanor played it differently than the recording. Slower, more melancholy. Like someone who'd actually lived the lyrics, who understood what it meant to face the final curtain and say you did it your way, even when your way led nowhere special. The tourists weren't listening. They were talking about Alcatraz, about cable cars, about where to eat tomorrow. The businessmen were discussing a merger. The young couple was holding hands. Nobody paid attention to the old woman at the piano. Except the man who just walked in. He wore a fedora pulled low, a dark overcoat, sunglasses, even though it was 8 o'clock at night. He sat at the bar, ordered a Jack Daniels, and listened. Really listened. The way Eleanor played that song, every note carried weight. Every phrase told a story. She reached the bridge. Her hands were shaking worse than usual tonight. The arthritis was bad. Cold weather always made it worse. She hit a wrong note, winced, kept going. The man at the bar turned slightly, watching her now. Eleanor finished the song. The tourists didn't applaud. They didn't notice. She was furniture to them, background noise. She started another song, Autumn Leaves, her fingers finding the melody through muscle memory, older than most people in that room. The man at the bar stood up, walked over to the piano. Eleanor didn't see him at first, focused on her hands, willing them to cooperate. Then she felt someone standing beside her. She looked up. Even with the fedora and sunglasses, even in the dim light, she knew that face. Every musician in America knew that face. "Mr. Sinatra," she whispered. Frank removed his sunglasses, smiled that smile. "Don't stop playing. I'm just listening." Eleanor's hands froze on the keys. I can't. Not with you here." "Why not?" "Because I'm butchering your song." These hands, she held them up, twisted, shaking. "They don't work like they used to." Frank looked at her hands, then at her face. "How long have you been playing?" 60 years. "Then your hands work fine. They've just got some stories to tell." Keep playing." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. She turned back to the piano, started Autumn Leaves again. This time her hands didn't shake as much. Maybe because she'd forgotten to be nervous. Maybe because Frank Sinatra was standing next to her piano, listening like her music mattered. When she finished, Frank said, "You played Carnegie Hall." It wasn't a question. Eleanor nodded. 1934. A lifetime ago. I remember reading about you. Eleanor Hayes. They called you the next Rubinstein. That was before. She trailed off. Before what? Before life happened. Frank understood. He pulled out a chair, sat down next to the piano. The bar had gone completely silent now. Everyone had recognized him. The tourists, the businessmen, the young couple, all staring. "Play My Way again," Frank said quietly. "But this time, play it the way you feel it. Not the way I recorded it. Your way." Eleanor looked at him. "I can't play it like you sing it. I don't want you to. I want to hear what 73 years sounds like on those keys." She turned back to the piano, closed her eyes, and played. This time she didn't think about the tourists. Didn't think about her shaking hands. Didn't think about Carnegie Hall or what she used to be. She just played. Slow, haunting. Every wrong note became part of the story. Every hesitation became a breath. Every measure carried the weight of a life lived fully, painfully, honestly. Frank stood up, walked to the microphone that sat unused in the corner. Mr. Cardoza, the owner, stood frozen behind the bar. Frank looked at him, pointed to the microphone. Mr. Cardoza scrambled to turn it on. Frank began to sing. Not the powerful, confident version from his recording. Something quieter, more fragile, matching Eleanor's piano note for note, phrase for phrase. Two old pros who'd been counted out, written off, forgotten, reminding everyone in that room what real artistry sounded like. The tourists stopped talking. The businessmen put down their drinks. The young couple held their breath. Mr. Cardoza's hand shook as he pulled out a camera from behind the bar. The new Polaroid his daughter had given him for Christmas. He started taking pictures. 3 shots. That's all the film he had. Frank and Eleanor played through the entire song. When they reached the final line, "I did it my way," Eleanor's voice, rough and untrained, joined Frank's for just those 5 words. Barely a whisper, but everyone heard it. The song ended. Silence. Then applause. Not polite applause. The kind that makes your hands hurt. The kind that doesn't stop. Frank turned to Eleanor. "When's the last time you played for people who actually listened?" "Tonight." He smiled. "I'm recording an album next month. Standards. I need a piano player who understands what these songs really mean. Someone who's lived them. You interested?" Eleanor laughed, a sound that was half joy, half disbelief. "Mr. Sinatra, I can barely play anymore. My hands, your hands are perfect. They've got 73 years of truth in them. That's what I need. I haven't recorded since 1938. Then you're overdue." The next month, Eleanor Hayes flew to Los Angeles. Frank's producer had reservations. "She's 73. Her hands shake. We can get younger players, studio musicians who..." "We're using Eleanor," Frank said. End of discussion. They recorded 6 songs together. Eleanor's piano, Frank's voice. Simple arrangements. No orchestra, no strings. Just 2 people who'd been through everything and came out the other side. The album wasn't a commercial success. It didn't top charts. But musicians loved it. Critics called it Sinatra's most honest work. And Eleanor Hayes, who'd spent 30 years playing in a piano bar for people who didn't listen, got to hear her music on the radio again. She died 2 years later, in 1973, peacefully, in her sleep, with a letter from Frank Sinatra on her nightstand that said, "You reminded me why I sing. Not for the crowds, for the truth. Thank you." The 3 Polaroid photos Mr. Cardoza took that night in the Milano bar became famous. They show Frank Sinatra, the biggest star in the world, standing in a nobody bar in North Beach, singing with an old woman at a broken piano. In one photo, you can see Eleanor's face. She's not looking at the camera. She's looking at her hands on the keys, and she's smiling. That photo sold at auction in 2019 for $47,000. The buyer was a piano teacher from San Francisco who'd heard the story and wanted to hang it in her studio to remind her students that it's never too late, that your hands might shake and your venue might be small, but if you play with truth, someone will listen. The Milano bar closed in 1985. But there's a plaque on the building now that says, "On this site, March 16, 1971, Frank Sinatra heard Eleanor Hayes play My Way and remembered why music matters." Eleanor Hayes never became the next Rubinstein. She never played Carnegie Hall again. But on one Tuesday night in March, she played for an audience of one who actually listened. And that changed everything. Because that's what legends do. They don't just perform. They recognize. They see the forgotten people and remind the world that talent doesn't expire. That truth doesn't age. That sometimes the most beautiful music comes from hands that shake, in bars nobody visits, played by people the world stopped watching. Frank Sinatra walked into that bar by accident. He'd been driving through North Beach, saw the piano through the window, walked in for a drink. But nothing about that night was accidental. It was 2 artists, separated by fame and fortune, connected by the same truth. Music isn't about perfection. It's about meaning something. An elderly woman played My Way in a bar. Sinatra walked in, and what happened next went viral before viral existed. Because real recognizes real, and truth never goes out of style.
This is the story of what happens when greatness recognizes greatness, even when the world has stopped looking. Frank Sinatra didn't walk into that bar to save Eleanor Hayes. He walked in to listen, and in listening he reminded her and everyone who heard this story that your value isn't measured by who's watching, it's measured by the truth you bring. If this story moved you, subscribe to keep these forgotten moments alive. Question for you. When was the last time you really listened to someone the world had stopped hearing? Let me know in the comments.